Welcome to the Coaches Show on 90.1 KBPK. That's right, Ryan Osborne, Corey Nalen. I'm the old guy. We are the voices of Fullerton College sports on 90.1 KBPK. And the man to my left is the host of the Coaches Show. So, let's start with you, Ryan Osborne, because we're going to start tonight talking a little Fullerton College football, not about the future. Let's take a look back, guys, at least the last year, because the last few years have been tumultuous, turmoil, and not as pretty as the man to my right.
Well, I mean, Mark, when you talk about that, the biggest thing is that Fullerton College last year went in with a lot of expectations. You talked about the previous years not really living up to the previous hype that they had. Well, last year there was an expectation of a conference championship. Fullerton did make it to a de facto conference championship against Golden West, but they lost that one in a one-score game. They turned around and had an opportunity to go to a bowl game as well, an important bowl game, but they end up losing to San Diego Mesa as well, so that takes away their possibility for maybe an at-large bid into the playoffs. So for Fullerton College, not only does it hurt that they didn't have the season that they like, but they see a conference rival win the conference championship and move on to the playoff as well.
Corey, when we talk about the years, too, I mean, we had COVID. We had controversy before that. So is this a team that's just starting all over? Because it felt like the magic left Fullerton College.
Yeah, the magic is gone. I mean, like B.B. King said, the thrill is gone, and that's what happened with Fullerton College, really, these last couple of years, especially when COVID happened. It just halted all momentum that they had the previous couple of years, where even in their, their band season, I was going to say strike season, but what do you call it? Their suspension season. Thank you, Ryan. They went undefeated. They were still a quality team that really performed. But the last couple of years, especially with COVID, that really hampered Fullerton. And last year, no way you can say it was just up and down, and it was an awful season for Fullerton. Even though they had a winning record, it wasn't the Fullerton Hornet football team that you're normally and used to seeing.
So we get ready, Ryan, to look at this season. Of course, yourself, Corey, and I will be out there doing the games. We'll be doing all the home games. We should be doing some of the away games on sportsnetusa.net. So make sure you look forward to those games. They'll be on the website to let you know. When we look at this year, I mean, we're dealing with the unknown because no old faces are around like we've seen in the years in the past.
I mean, Mark, you take a look at just some of the people who ended up moving on to the next level. The entire linebacking core went to the next level for Fullerton because they were exceptional. You have a guy who goes into the Pac-12, another guy who goes into the Big 12 as well. Fullerton had a lot of quality players on not only the linebacking core but the secondary as well, and they proved it by moving on to the university level. But as you mentioned, that means that there's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of guys that when we talked to Brian Crooks, we asked him, hey, when you look at your defense, how does it look so far? And he said, very simply, it looks new. There's a lot of guys that he has to learn the familiarity with and also teach that brand new system. So when you look at Fullerton College, not only do you have the turnover, but the coaching staff has to find those people who they look at and they say, this is the right person, even though it's early in their Fullerton College career, who will be able to lead us not only defensively, but also the entire offense for the most part, finding that turnover as well. So it's going to be difficult for this coaching staff, not just getting ready for game one, but finding leadership in early camp.
And when we think about the conference, Corey Nalen, I mean, Golden West College was hot. They did something they normally don't do. Nick Mitchell had him there, but for Nick Mitchell, everybody has gone there too. So the big question will be, is everybody starting over? And if they are, who's that giving advantage to?
With COVID, everybody was hampered and everybody was hurt. We heard all last season that, we didn't get this game, so we're catching up on one game. So we missed this game and there's something happened here, so we're catching up on. It was catch-up last year. And that's why this year is so interesting, because all teams in the CCCAA went through something. And so, it's new for everybody, and that's what you like about this coaching staff that Fullerton has, because they have experience on offense and defense, because they can craft and hopefully mold an identity this year, which they didn't have last year, into something that's basically fresh and new.
I mean, Corey, when you mention that, you take a look at Fullerton College. Last year, they looked to start off the season with the Key to the County game. They don't get that opportunity because of different COVID regulations that happen in the CCCA. Like you mentioned, it hit everyone. There wasn't a single team that wasn't affected by those regulations. But in 2022, they finally have an opportunity to go a full calendar year from January until August with their usual practices, their usual spring ball, their usual training in the offseason as well. So it's not only just that they had to deal with it during the season, but all of a sudden you're looking at it as each and every program is hitting the reset button this year because they are finally back to normal after 3 seasons away.
You know, one of the things I've got to ask you, Ryan, when we look at it too is familiar faces on the coaching staff, some new faces, but a lot of the familiar faces are now coaching something differently. And I've got to say consistency has always been one of the things for Fullerton. You knew who was going to coach you year after year after year. So what does the new faces, same old coaches, but a new face at a new position, is that going to help or hinder this Fullerton team?
You know what? I think it's going to help them. Each and every year that we've seen...
You took my answer.
Well, each and every year that we've seen a new coach here at Fullerton College, I mean, you look at Coach Dixon. Met him just a couple years back, right before the COVID season, and he turned his position that he coached, going from the city of Walnut to Fullerton College, turned it into a powerhouse, one that was to be reckoned with in the state of California. Anytime we meet a new coach, it's almost as if they breathe brand new life into that position that they coach. Now, when you talk about coaches that we've seen for a while, but coaching different positions, just take a look at Coach Gardner. You know, a few years back, we were introduced to him as the tight ends coach. He helped get some all-conference performers, some all-California performers to the next level. Turns around, all of a sudden, he has to help out with the running backs. They turn into a great group. Now he's a wide receivers coach for Fullerton College. So you take a look at those coaches that we've seen before, but coaching different positions, they have a proven track record of success even when they make those changes.
And Corey, we look at Garrett Campbell, head coach, been around now for a couple years, and of course a stalwart friend of all three of us, Brian Crooks at defense. And I got to look at Brian Crooks and Phil Austin. We've always looked at the defense win things. Having Brian Crooks there is like having that comfortable old car. I hate to put it that way, but you know what you're going to get from Brian, and I think that's important to have him there.
Yeah, that consistency, that just strength that he has on the defensive side of the ball is going to lead those new guys, all the fresh faces, into something that hopefully they buy in this year quicker or at all than what they had since last year. On the offensive side with Garrett, I think you have Garrett, who's I don't think he's found his stride yet as head coach and offensive play caller. Yeah, 2016, 2017, just phenomenal. But I don't think we've seen the Garrett Campbell that we know is going to walk the sidelines for Fullerton. And I really think it's going to be this year that you're going to see that, okay, that's the guy who said, okay, we're going to take this all the way on the offensive side of the ball.
Don't forget, the Coaches Show will be on every week, so where we're starting at tonight, we'll always be coming at you with updates about Fullerton College Hornets, the football team, and all the other sports that will be going on at Fullerton College here on 90.1 KBPK with your host, Ryan Osborne. Guys, before we get to interviews with the coaches, we haven't seen the team, but I'm going to ask you. I'm going to put you on the line now. Where are they going to end up? What do you think they're going to do overall record? And where do you think they'll end in the conference?
Give me conference champions. They're going to have an 8-win season. And I think what you're going to see is Brian Crook's defense turns the tide and becomes one of the top 5 defenses. Consistency-wise, we've seen him have those really great defenses. I think this year is almost going to be historic from his defensive side. Well,
we'll see if Corey Nayland blames the defensive backs. Where are they going to be at this year?
They'll be well. I think the offense is going to carry them. I really do. I think this is going to be a breakout season for the offense. And when I mean breakout, yeah, we saw the 2016, 2017. But again, it's been down a little bit last few years and with COVID. So I think, if you will, it's going to be a breakout season for the offense.
So for Corey Nalen, Ryan Osborne, and myself, the old guy, make sure you're with us for all the home games here on 90.1 KBPK and SportsNetUSA.net. And then for a few of the away games this year also for SportsNetUSA.net and 90.1 KBPK. And every week, the man to my left, the host of the Coaches Show, Ryan Osborne, just before we get away. This year it'll be a little unusual with the Coaches Show. We're going to do a little water polo and everything else. So the Coaches Show is going to expand this year on looking at all the sports at Fullerton College.
Well, Mark, I'm actually going to get into that a little bit more in our closing, but the fans can look forward to water polo, volleyball, men and women's soccer at Fullerton College as well, in addition to some basketball interviews. So we've got a lot coming up on the Coaches Show with a lot of different coaches, different coaching staffs, and also different viewpoints as to how to approach a brand new season and a brand new era post-COVID.
So for Corey, Ryan, I'm the old guy. You've been watching the Coaches Show on 90.1 KBPK.
So we are here with head coach Garrett Campbell. And Coach, we always talk to you at the start of the season, and usually it's, hey, what are you looking for in game number one? But in this case, you still got a week to prepare. When you're looking at this team kind of finishing camp, going into preparation for week number one, how do you think your team's looking so far?
I think we're okay. I think we're doing a good job. I think we're playing assignment football. We're doing some things, and we're growing every day. We're getting better every day. We'll go into the scrimmage tomorrow and find out, when we face somebody else, who are we? What's our identity? So we'll get a good glimpse into what we are, because all we know right now is what we think we are. But until you play somebody else, you don't really know. So.
I mean, Coach, when you mention that type of scrimmage, how difficult is it as a coach to kind of game plan for a scrimmage like that when you do have to go against someone, but not necessarily having film on them per se?
Yeah, it's a little tricky. The nice thing about a scrimmage is that they're going to play their base, the base offense, base defense. We're going to play our base offense, base defense. So your rules should pretty well hold up. You're not really scheming to win. Although, obviously, as a scrimmage, you want to be competitive, you want to win. But there's really no score. It's really more about are you operating your offense efficiently? Are you doing the same things defensively? Are you hitting the gaps where you should be? So you're kind of measuring those things, and are you playing fast? And I think those are the things that you're kind of measuring. So you can't really. It's not a game. At the end of the day, it's not a game. But you got to make it as close to a game as possible, and you got to take it for what it's worth, which is almost a game, but not really a game.
When you mention that, sometimes you'll hear coaches from other sports with preseason games or scrimmages, they kind of look at it and say, okay, this is a chance to see what my 2s and 3s can do and see what I have going into the start of the season. Is this the same kind of case for you?
Yeah, because what happens during camp is you have your 1s that kind of separate themselves, and then you have your 2s and 3s who maybe have been playing well. I know we've got a good quarterback competition going on with 3 guys. I need to see where it's at, and I need to see it against somebody else who doesn't know our plays and doesn't know how we call things and that kind of thing. But the same is true for offensive linemen or defensive backs or linebackers, where you kind of know who your 1s are, but who are your 2s and 3s, and does all of a sudden a 3 step up that you weren't expecting, and that happens a lot.
When you look at your team, how difficult is it to kind of look at the start of camp versus where you are now and kind of evaluate and say, okay, we still have areas to improve on, and this is what I want to work on specifically over the next week?
Yeah, so there's always areas to improve on. But what you do, that's exactly what you do. You hone in, you focus on what it is you think you need to improve. Even today, even though we're out here in helmets and doing kind of more of a walkthrough type deal, there was about 3 or 4 concepts that we just need to hammer home, some things we saw in film, fix with our guys, talked about with our guys, and then bring it out in the film and drill it and work it real quick, even though we don't have a lot of time on a walkthrough day like today, but we need to shore some things up. And so I think you constantly are doing that. The hard part of it at this level is they're all freshmen and sophomores. And so you don't have a lot of that experience at juniors and seniors that you do at the 4-year level. So that's what makes it tough. So every week is we got to clean this up or we got to fix this. Every week is like that. There's always something that's a little messed up to fix.
Coach, looking at your background, you have that university experience coming here to Fullerton College. You just mentioned it. It's all freshmen and sophomores. How difficult is it to be able to instill in those brand new, fresh out of high school freshmen this is what a college schedule looks like. This is what a college workload looks like.
Yeah, extremely difficult. The hardest thing is just getting to understand the expectations that there's, you're in college. There's a lot more paperwork even to play college football than there was in high school. High school, you just got a physical and you just win. I assume that's kind of how it is. It's, a lot of times maybe the parents will do something. Our guys, we have eligibility forms, we have registration. We have working with our athletic trainers. We have all sorts of things that they've got to do. And they're not used to that when they first come in. So that's a bit of a shock. And then all of a sudden you go out and then how do we practice and how do we do things? And the speed of the game is faster. Guys are bigger. Guys are stronger. So there's all these different things where the expectation levels for everything kind of just raised up. Even when they walk into a sociology classroom or it could be a history of rock and roll class. That instructor is going to expect more out of them than that high school professor did or high school instructor did. So, it just raised it up. So it's hard, for someone who's been at the 4-year level, it's really hard because you're used to having guys who are 21 or 22 saying, hey, you know what, why don't you go over and talk to little Johnny, he's struggling a little bit, or hey, he's having trouble kind of understanding why these little things are important. Well, at our level, that falls on the coaches. We have to explain it. But much like a parent-child relationship, sometimes that child doesn't always trust the parent, but they don't always believe the parent until something happens and they go, oh, the parent was right, or oh, the coach was right. So that's one of the things that we talk about a lot with our players is the answer is yes, coach. And our guys have done a great job with that, but when a coach is addressing you, the answer is yes, coach. Because if it's anything else, they're just defensive, and they automatically have a guard up. And when you have a guard up and you're defensive, you can't learn and you can't grow. So our kids have done a great job of really buying into the yes, coach part of it, and I've been really impressed with that. So that's one way we try and combat it.
Do you feel that this scrimmage, building on what you just mentioned, do you feel that this scrimmage has the opportunity to, in addition to that classwork, in addition to finding out what a college workload is, the scrimmage gives them a chance to look forward to game one and say, okay, this is also what a college speed, a college hit is going to look like?
Yeah, I think it does. And what it does is it puts it into a stage of reality. Like, holy cow, it's here. Like, this is actually happening now. So even if they're gray shirting and they're not playing for us, even they're sitting there going, oh, this is really moving now. This train has left the station. It's rolling. And I think once we get on the field tomorrow, we start hitting a little bit, go against Palomar. I think now guys will understand how different college football is compared to high school football.
When you look at the players that you have on your team right now, compared to last year you don't necessarily have as many returners or returning starters. How hard is it to be able to cultivate leaders in your program with guys who are maybe brand new at starting for the first time?
Yeah, I think we have a great core of leaders on this team, and I think it's a significant number. And I think it's a significant number because what we did in the off-season weight program and what we did through spring and what we carried it through June and July. We had a great number of players that really hit the weight room and really built up the trust with each other. So now you have this core group, not only are they kind of a talented group, but they're just a very headstrong, confident group because they've built themselves in showing up every day. They're consistent. Everything that we ask our guys to be, they've done. So it's been really good. And a large group of that is actually gray shirts from last year. The young men that didn't play, that knew they weren't going to play and still busted their hump and spent lifted during the season 3 days a week, obviously out of season 4 days a week, and just got guys like Ryan Alamo, guys like Eric Heil, and guys like Chris Harm, just to name a few, who have all got bigger, stronger, faster, and they're ready to play. And those guys would have played for us last year, but the number of snaps they would have got probably weren't significant enough to waste a year on them. But this year, holy cow, are they ready to play? So it's even though they're freshmen, technically true freshmen, they've got the maturity of a sophomore, and that's huge. And so I think that critical mass, but a lot of that was built in the weight room, and they did a great job with it.
I mean, you and I have talked about this before off camera, but you take a look at the fact that this is really your first full year's worth of a program in a while. Do you think that also contributed to helping get that chemistry going with those leaders you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. And really, oddly enough, as odd as it sounds, it's actually my first full year as a head coach here, even though I've technically been the head coach since game 3 of 18, because of some things we went through then. And then we had then we went through some other stuff, and then we had COVID, and so we've never really had the off season that we've had, and Fullerton College football, whether it's me or anybody else, its strength is in the weight room, and its strength is, I don't know if he's still around, Coach Crooks, and what he does in the weight room, and that's a big part of our strength, and has been for a long, long time, and so the bottom line is the simple fact that our guys built that trust through that, through that January, February, March that we hadn't had before was pretty significant.
Coach, if you could give your team one message before game one, what would that be?
You've done the work, have fun. I mean, at the end of the day, we've busted our hump. We've done everything. Kids have done everything I've asked them to do. We've gotten after it. We've had some violent practices. I mean, our guys have gotten after it. Now have fun. Play assignment football, but have fun.
Thank you, Coach. We look forward to seeing that fun on the field.
I do too.
So we've been talking with head coach Garrett Campbell right here on The Coaches Show. So we want to thank Coach Garrett Campbell for joining us on The Coaches Show this week to preview at least week 0. We'll talk to more of his team coming up next week. But before we get to the closing here on The Coaches Show, we want to remind you what took place last year. You see Fullerton College's schedule, the wins and the losses. That 6-5 record, not where they wanted to be, especially if you take a look at the month of November. That huge win over Saddleback by 1 point at Yorba Linda, and you follow it up with a loss in the conference championship, and then you lose to San Diego Mesa and the bowl game as well. So for Fullerton College, the start was fantastic, but that last month is what really tripped them up. But when you take a look at the individuals for the season, Fullerton College in the passing game, we're looking for a little consistency. Galban had a really nice season, 1,800 yards. He threw for 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and he had a long of 71. However, he also made his impact be felt in the running game, where he was actually in the top 5 in terms of rushing throughout the season. Brandon Rankins led the team in rushing overall throughout the season. We talked to him a lot during the year. He ended up finishing with nearly 750 yards throughout the year, about 70 yards per game, 12 touchdowns, and he had a long of 98, which was very close to the Fullerton College record. Trey Edwards, who is also quarterback for the Fullerton College Hornets, and Chandler Galban, both of those two getting opportunities to affect the run game for Fullerton. When you take a look at the receiving corps, pretty spread out amongst the stats for receivers for the Fullerton College Hornets, as is typical of a Garrett Campbell offense. Braden Huffman, Kashawn Griffin, both finishing with over 400 yards. DeJounte Thomas up there as well. Christopher Kuntz, who had some really big moments throughout the middle part of the season, especially in that win over top of Saddleback. He finished with 206. And those 3 receivers combined having 7 touchdowns. When you take a look at this team, though, they were really led by that defense, who had a spectacular showing. Jonathan Smith led the way in total tackles in the secondary, along with Chandler Brown as well. But the defensive line and the linebacking core were fantastic. Jalen Early, Isaac Hurtado, Junior Wiley, all of them transferring to big schools and getting a chance to play at the 4-year level. Jalen Early with 50 tackles in addition to 10 tackles for loss. He was huge for Fullerton College. That defensive line was big. Troy McDonald, one of the big guys that we heard his name mentioned many times throughout the year, finishing with 7 tackles for loss and 3 sacks as well. So the defense, huge for Fullerton College. But if you take a look at that defense, well, you take a look at the second team all-conference selections. You started off with Troy McDonald, Jordan Rice. Both of those two guys, like we just mentioned a few moments ago, nice seasons. They were two of the leaders for Fullerton College that Fullerton was able to depend on. Both of them sophomores, so they move on once their Fullerton College career is finished. So Troy McDonald and Jordan Rice get a second team selection. When you take a look at the second team offensive selections, you got William Pyroni for Fullerton. He ends up as a sophomore. Again, leadership for these Fullerton College Hornets, getting a second team all-offense selection. And Chandler Galban, who got the second team selection as well as a true freshman for Fullerton College. Of course, Jake Retzlaff, the one who ends up getting the first team selection for Golden West College. Now, when you take a look at the first team all defensive selections in the SCFA, well, Fullerton College, let's put it this way, they had a nice showing. Jason Wallace, Jalen Early, Isaac Hurtado, Junior Wiley, Jordan Wright, who moved on to Kansas State, Jonathan Smith, Kashawn Griffin for a kick returner and a punt returner as well. Fantastic seasons. They were awarded with selections. Take a look at the first team on offense. Nathan Ramirez, Marcelo Saenz, both there for Fullerton. Braden Huffman, Brandon Rankins. Both of those two guys also getting those selections. Brandon Rankins getting the opportunity now to play at the 4-year level. So for Fullerton College, lots of selections in the first and second team all-conference. Now, when you take a look at the all-California first team defense, you'll see a familiar name. Jason Wallace is up there at the top, and towards the bottom of your screen, Jordan Wright gets a selection as well. So that's why they got a lot of attention. They were fantastic on defense. On offense, Fullerton College gets Marcelo Saenz and Brandon Rankins as all-California first-team offensive selections in Region 3. That's huge for them. Great awards. All-Americans, first-team defense for Fullerton. Jason Wallace is right back up there, and Kashawn Griffin as well. Wallace anchoring that defensive line, and Kashawn Griffin, as we've seen, many records for the Fullerton College Hornets, leads us to our first-team All-American offensive selections. You take a look. Marcelo Saenz right back up there. Huge thing for him, an All-American as Fullerton College, again, led by those individuals. When you take a look at the standings from last year, well, for Fullerton, didn't pan out the way that they wanted. They finished third in the conference to Golden West and San Diego Mesa. San Diego Mesa, of course, having that tiebreaker with the head-to-head in the final game of the regular season. Should have been earlier, but due to different regulations, that game had to be postponed. It takes place after the conference championship game, and San Diego Mesa finishes with a win over Fullerton to put them in second place in the National Southern League standings. So for Fullerton College, those are the two teams that they had to look up to once the season was done. And just to tell you from experience, talking with the coaches, talking with fans, talking with the players, they are making sure that they take a look at those standings from last year and use them as motivation coming up in this year's standings. When you take a look at the overall rankings at the end of the year, City College of San Francisco, of course, taking the national championship and the state championship, they finished number 1, but you do not see Fullerton all the way until you reach number 16. So that's something that has to be rectified coming up this season. And as you heard from Coach Garrett Campbell, his team looks great coming out of camp. They look good coming out of camp. Now they get an opportunity to see some live gameplay, looking to change that top 16 selection.
Well, we'd like to thank all the coaches for the interviews tonight here on 90.1 KBPK. And we'll be coming back to you real soon for the Coaches Show with Ryan Osborne and a variety of guests later on in this season. Ryan, it's going to be an interesting football season and a variety of sports here at Fullerton College. Should be a fun season.
Yeah, and when you talk about this season, this upcoming semester at Fullerton College is going to be exciting, not just for the fans, not just for the teams, but also for us, the broadcast crew, the guys who interview as well, setting things up. Why? Because we've got water polo coming your way, which we're really excited to bring you on 90.1 KBPK. Make sure that you stay tuned to the YouTube page. Make sure that you stay tuned to kbpk.org. Or take a look at our Instagram page as well, because we're going to be bringing you a lot of updates from volleyball, from water polo, some basketball as well, and not to mention the Fullerton College Hornet football team directly behind us. But we're really excited to get Coach Gabriel Martinez's team on KBPK, national championship pedigree. We've seen it multiple times in the last few years that he has taken his team to the championship or championship final. They're going to get some airtime on KBPK. We're really looking forward to it.
And Corey, we're going to see a little women's volleyball. We've been doing that for years. And you're going to throw in maybe a little high school football on 90.1 KBPK.
Yes.
So for Corey Nalen, Ryan Osborne, you've been watching the Coaches Show on 90.1 KBPK.